Have you ever felt like you were trapped in a nightmare where everything around you seemed perfect, only to discover that nothing was what it appeared? Imagine being in a family, believing you're surrounded by love and support, only to realize that the very people you trust most are the ones trying to destroy you. This is the shocking reality I faced when I found out that my stepmother had cast a spell to ruin my life. At first, it felt like a cruel joke, but the deeper I dug, the more horrifying the truth became. A curse designed to break me emotionally, spiritually, and mentally. Slowly but surely. What was her motive? Why would anyone do such a thing to someone they were supposed to love? In this video, I'm going to take you on a journey of betrayal, manipulation, and dark magic. I'll share the horrifying truth behind my stepmother's curse and how I fought to break free from her control. You'll hear about the power of family, the price of magic, and the strength we all have to rise above the darkness. But here's the twist. This story isn't just about curses and manipulation. It's about discovering your own power, about reclaiming your life, and about realizing that no one can ever take away your happiness unless you let them. So, hit that follow button and stick around. You won't want to miss how I broke free, and how you can too. And don't forget to drop a comment below. Have you ever felt like someone was trying to control your life? Let's talk about it. I remember when everything seemed perfect. I was just a teenager, still naive, still believing that good things were meant to last. I had a pretty normal life. Well, normal for me. My father and we'd always been close. He was the kind of man who would drop everything just to spend time with me, and that meant everything. We had our routines. Weekends were sacred. Saturdays were for long walks in the park or catching a movie, just the two of us. That was our bond. Then came her. I never imagined how everything would change after she walked into our lives. First, she seemed so kind, so loving. My dad had met her a few months before, and as soon as I saw them together, I could tell that there was something special about her. I was happy for him, really. I could see how much she meant to him. But deep down, I guess I was nervous. Who wouldn't be? My dad, my hero, was about to share his life with someone else. Her name was Clara, and she seemed perfect. Too perfect almost. Beautiful, confident, and always so put together. She had this charm about her that made it impossible not to like her. I didn't know what to expect, but she made me feel at ease from the start. At least that's what I thought. I was too young to see the signs, but looking back now, I realize how the cracks started to show right from the beginning. The first few months felt like a dream. We'd all have dinner together, talking and laughing like a real family. Clara would cook these amazing meals, and we'd sit at the table, chatting about everything from school to the latest news. It felt like we were a family of three, and I couldn't remember the last time I felt so complete. It was almost too good to be true. But like most things in life, when things seem perfect, you should start looking closer. And that's where it all started to change. First, it wasn't so obvious. I mean, who could blame me? When you're caught up in the comfort of a new beginning, everything seems like it's falling into place. Clara was still that picture of perfection, the kind of stepmother you'd see in movies. Caring, thoughtful, and seemingly harmless. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could all coexist as one big happy family. But, of course, life isn't that simple. And neither are people. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly, I began to notice little things, tiny shifts in Clara's behavior that felt off. At first, they were subtle, almost too subtle to be taken seriously. Like how she'd smile a little too much whenever my father complimented me. A smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It was always there, this coldness lurking beneath her warm exterior. But I brushed it off. I told myself I was imagining things. Then there was the way she'd speak to me. First, it was all so sweet, always so supportive. But after a while, her words started to feel different. The compliments she gave me began to have an edge, like there was a hidden agenda behind them. She'd praise me one moment, and then in the next breath, drop a comment that would make me question my self-worth. You're really good at that, you know. But don't get too cocky, she'd say. Her voice dripping with something I couldn't quite place. That was when I started paying attention. Little things started to feel off, like a quiet tension growing in the house. My dad didn't seem to notice. He was wrapped up in work, in his new life with Clara, and that made me feel even more isolated. When I tried to talk to him about it, he'd just shrug it off. "She's just trying to be a good stepmom," he'd say. But I knew there was something more there, something I couldn't quite put my finger on. Then the real changes started. It was almost like I was living in a parallel universe where the lines between what was real and what was manipulated were starting to blur. Clara would start to make decisions about things that didn't involve her, pushing me into situations where I felt completely uncomfortable. She'd rearrange my things without asking. I caught her a few times, moving things around in my room, throwing out books or even clothes that I had grown attached to. The excuse was always the same. "I thought you'd want a more organized space." But in reality it felt like control, a need to reshape my life in her image, to push me into something I didn't want to be. It wasn't just physical changes either. Her behavior at the dinner table began to shift. I used to love the way we'd all sit around laughing and chatting. But suddenly, Clara would start making these biting remarks, disguised as jokes, to undermine me. One evening, when I mentioned that I had done well on a test, Clara turned to my dad and said, "Well, that's a relief. I was starting to wonder if you'd taught her anything useful." My dad laughed it off, but it hit me like a slap in the face. I sat there, trying to understand why she felt the need to take a shot at me. And as if that wasn't enough, Clara started to play mind games. She'd subtly manipulate situations, turning them in her favor, and then act innocent when things went wrong. I'd be the one to get blamed. One afternoon, I caught Clara leaving the back door unlocked after cleaning the house. My dog, who was normally well-behaved, ran outside. When my dad found out, Clara turned the situation on me, saying, "Well, maybe if you weren't so distracted with your own life, you'd remember to keep the door locked." It wasn't true. I had been in my room, focusing on homework, but somehow Clara turned the narrative against me, painting me as the irresponsible one. It was these little but significant moments that started to eat at me. The feeling that something wasn't right deepened, and with it came this overwhelming sense of powerlessness. It was like I was losing control of my own life, and no matter how hard I tried to speak out or assert myself, I was constantly pushed back into place. At night, I would lay awake, replaying everything in my mind, trying to make sense of it all. It wasn't just the comments, the manipulation, or the way she seemed to isolate me from my dad. It was the sense of loss, the loss of control over my own space, my own life. And the worst part was nobody saw it. To everyone else, Clara was still the perfect stepmom. To my dad, she was the loving woman he'd married. But to me, she was a stranger, and a dangerous one at that. It wasn't just a conflict of personalities anymore. It was something much deeper, a war of power. And I was starting to realize that I was losing. Clara wasn't just trying to change the dynamic of our family. She was trying to control it. And that, as it turned out, would be only the beginning of something far darker. The longer I stayed in that house, the more I started to feel like my entire life was being rewritten, and not in the way I wanted it to be. Every smile, every touch, every word from Clara felt like part of an elaborate game. A game where I didn't have the rules, the power, or even a way to win. And that, I soon realized, was exactly what she wanted. At this point, everything about Clara felt like a web, carefully woven around me. I was walking through my life in a haze, constantly on edge, wondering when the next shift would happen. It was hard to explain to anyone because, on the surface, everything seemed perfect. On the outside, I was just a teenager living with my dad and his new wife, right? But on the inside, I felt trapped. I couldn't put my finger on why, but deep down, I knew that something was horribly wrong. It wasn't until I accidentally stumbled upon Clara's secret that everything began to click into place. I'll never forget how I found out. It was late at night, and I was walking through the house, unable to sleep. I had a strange feeling that night, like something was pulling me toward the study, a room I rarely visited, except for the occasional gathering with my dad and Clara. The door was slightly ajar, and I could hear Clara's voice inside, but it wasn't her usual soft, sweet tone. It was different, darker almost. I paused, leaning against the door, trying to make out her words. I shouldn't have been eavesdropping, but at that moment, I felt like I had no choice. I heard her speak to someone in a low whisper, though I couldn't make out the other person's voice. "It's all going according to plan," Clara said. "He's so far gone I don't think she'll even see it coming. The curse is set, and now I just have to wait for her to unravel." My heart stopped. Curse. What the hell was she talking about? I could feel my stomach twisting into knots. I wanted to leave, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I couldn't process what I had just heard. It was a terrifying thought. Could Clara really be doing something like that? My mind raced as I tried to make sense of everything. All those weird moments, those subtle jabs, the manipulation. Could it all be part of some kind of spell? Some dark magic? I had always thought Clara was a bit eccentric, but this was something entirely different. I needed to find out more. I couldn't just leave it there. My curiosity turned into something else. Desperation. I needed the truth. The next day I started my investigation. I began to pay closer attention to Clara's movements, watching her when I thought no one else was looking. I'd sneak into rooms when she wasn't around, trying to find any clues that could give me answers. The house that once felt like a sanctuary now felt like a maze full of traps that Clara had set. And then I found it. One afternoon I was cleaning up my room when I noticed something odd in the back of my closet, a small, weathered box that I hadn't seen before. I pulled it out, dusting it off, and realized that it wasn't just any box. It had intricate symbols carved into its surface. Symbols I'd never seen before. I opened it carefully, almost afraid of what I might find inside. Inside was a small book, bound in black leather, and on the cover, the words Magia Negra were etched in silver, as if calling to me. My hands shook as I opened the book, and I instantly realized this was no ordinary journal. The pages were filled with strange, arcane writings, accompanied by symbols that looked like they belonged in a witch's ritual. And then I found it, a page dedicated to a spell that sounded eerily familiar. The words were cryptic, but as I read through them, the meaning became clear. A curse to destroy a person's happiness and peace of mind, slowly unraveling their life until they were left with nothing. The description was chilling. It was exactly what had been happening to me. Slowly, piece by piece, my life was being destroyed. My relationships were crumbling, my peace of mind was slipping away, and I had no idea why. It wasn't just the minor annoyances anymore. It was all part of something much darker, much more sinister. I felt my heart race as I processed the words in front of me. Clara had been using this spell, this maldecao, on me, slowly pulling the strings of my life, making sure I lost control, making sure I suffered emotionally. All those little moments, those jabs, the isolation, they weren't just mistakes or bad luck. They were calculated. They were deliberate. It was then that I fully understood what Clara had done. She wasn't just a stepmother trying to fit into a new family. She was a force, a manipulator with power. She had been using this spell to ruin me, to ruin my life. But it didn't stop there. I kept reading, trying to make sense of how this spell worked. It wasn't just about the small acts of cruelty. It was about control, about making me doubt myself, my relationships, and my reality. She was trying to break me down from the inside out. As I read more, I began to piece together how the spell worked. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It was a gradual process, a slow burn. The curse fed on my fears, my insecurities, and turned them into something more. And the worst part, it was all linked to Clara's desire for control. The spell was a tool, a weapon she used to destroy my happiness, my peace, my life. And she had been using it all along, without me ever realizing it. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. I had uncovered something much darker than I could have ever imagined. The girl who had once been naive, trusting, and hopeful was now faced with a reality so warped, so foreign, that it felt like I had entered a nightmare. And the scariest part, I didn't know how to stop it. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let her win. Not like this. I had to find a way to fight back, to break the curse and regain control of my life before it was too late. The battle was just beginning. When I first uncovered Clara's secret, her spell, her manipulation, her dark magic, it felt like a punch to the gut. The very woman I had been trying to trust, trying to accept as a part of my family, had been quietly working to tear my life apart. But that was only the beginning. Once I knew about the curse, once I knew about the spell she had cast, I couldn't help but wonder, why? Why me? Why was she doing this? Was I really that much of a threat? The more I thought about it, the more the pieces began to fall into place. Clara had been in my life for a while now, but I never truly understood who she was, what her real motives were. All this time she had been playing the part of the perfect stepmother, but there was always something about her that never felt genuine. It wasn't just about a desire to take my place. It was something much deeper. Something rooted in a past I didn't know about. I started asking questions. I began digging into Clara's history, her family, her past relationships. It was hard though. She kept everything so tightly controlled, so guarded. But the more I pried, the more I realized that Clara wasn't the sweet, innocent woman she appeared to be. She had a past, a dark one. A past that involved betrayal, jealousy, and a thirst for revenge that ran deeper than I could have imagined. Through a series of subtle conversations and quiet investigations, I discovered that Clara wasn't the woman she pretended to be. Her relationship with my father wasn't as pure as it seemed. She wasn't just some random woman who happened to fall in love with him. No, her motives went much deeper. She had known my father for years, even before he met my mother. They had a history. Complicated, messy history. And there was one thing Clara had never been able to forgive, my mother. It turned out that my mom, the woman I thought was perfect, had been involved in a scandalous affair with Clara's ex-husband. The betrayal had shattered Clara's world. For years, she had struggled to rebuild her life after the collapse of her marriage, all while watching my mother move on with ease. The hurt, the anger, the jealousy, it had never gone away. And when my father came into the picture, it was like the final straw. Clara couldn't handle the idea of my mom being the one to win, to have everything together while she was left in the dust. But that wasn't all. I also discovered that Clara had always been jealous of the bond my father and I shared. She resented how close we were, how much he loved me. It wasn't just about her wanting to be in the picture. It was about her wanting to control every part of my life, to break down the connection I had with my dad, so that I would have no one left but her. I started piecing together the full picture. Clara wasn't just trying to replace my mom. She was trying to rewrite the entire story of our family. She saw herself as the rightful person in my father's life, and she wasn't about to let anyone, especially not me, stand in her way. She had carefully laid the groundwork for years, playing the role of the sweet, loving stepmother. But underneath it all, she was a master manipulator, using everything she could to break me down and build herself up in my father's eyes. It all made sense now. Her behavior wasn't just random cruelty. It was strategic. Every word she said, every action she took, had been a calculated move in her larger game. The curse, the spell, everything was part of her plan. She wasn't just a woman scorned. She was a woman out for revenge. Revenge not just for the affair, but for the life she felt she had been denied. The spell wasn't just to make me suffer. It was to make me lose. To make me feel powerless. To break me emotionally and psychologically until I had no fight left in me. Clara's true nature was finally revealed. And with it came the full weight of the destruction she had been working towards. I could feel the tension building, the stakes getting higher. I wasn't just fighting for my happiness anymore. I was fighting for my very identity, for my place in my own family. And Clara wasn't about to let me win without a fight. But what I didn't know yet, what I couldn't have anticipated, was how far Clara was willing to go. She was prepared to take everything from me. My father's love, my peace of mind, and even my sense of self. And as much as I hated to admit it, I realized that I might not be able to stop her. At least, not without a fight. Once I uncovered Clara's motivations, her dark past, and the curse she had cast upon my life, I realized something far more terrifying. The battle wasn't just against her. It wasn't just about confronting her and exposing the manipulation. It was about the magic she had woven into the fabric of my reality. A magic that was more powerful, more controlling than I had ever imagined. I had always been skeptical about the supernatural. Magic, curses, all that stuff, it seemed like something out of a fantasy novel. But when I found that book, when I read those words, I realized that I was dealing with something far more real than I ever could have guessed. Clara's spell wasn't just a few words written on a page. It was a force, a supernatural power that had its claws in every part of my life. And it wasn't just about making me miserable. It was about breaking me down, piece by piece, until there was nothing left but a shell of who I used to be. The first few days after my discovery were nothing short of hell. I thought that maybe knowing the truth would give me the strength to fight back. I thought that once I understood what Clara had done, I could break free. But the opposite happened. Felt like the spell intensified. Like knowing the truth had somehow made it worse. I woke up every morning feeling this overwhelming sense of dread, as if I was suffocating under a weight I couldn't escape from. It was like Clara's magic had spread into every corner of my life, quietly controlling my thoughts, my emotions, my every move. I couldn't talk to my dad about it. He was too blinded by Clara's charm, by her seemingly perfect image. Every time I tried to bring up the strange things happening, he would dismiss them as coincidences. "She's just trying to help, honey," he'd say, always siding with her, always thinking the best of her. And it stung. Because I knew deep down that he didn't believe me. He didn't believe that I was in danger. It felt like I was fighting this battle alone, and that alone was enough to make me question my sanity. But I wasn't about to give up. Not after everything I had discovered. I started to search for a way to break the curse. I couldn't just sit back and let Clara win. But where do you even start when you're fighting against something as powerful as dark magic? It wasn't like I could just Google how to reverse a curse. I had no idea who I could trust, who I could talk to. So I turned to the only thing I had left, my instincts. I needed to find a way to fight back, but I couldn't do it alone. I needed answers and I needed help. And that's when I found them. Unexpected allies. Started with my best friend, Mia. She had always been into the strange and unusual. She loved reading books about the occult and magic, always joking that she wanted to become a witch. At first I thought her interest was just a phase, but then I realized, maybe she knew something that could help. Mia was skeptical at first, of course. She thought I was overreacting, maybe imagining things. But when I showed her the book I had found, when I read the curse aloud, her face went pale. She wasn't skeptical anymore. "This is real," she said quietly. "This is real magic." It was the first time in weeks that I felt like I wasn't crazy. She believed me. And that made all the difference. Together, Mia and I began our own research. We scoured the internet, read every book we could get our hands on, and reached out to people who might know more about the supernatural. We found old journals, obscure references to curses, and even a few cryptic forums where people claimed to have experienced the same kind of manipulation that I was going through. It was overwhelming at first. The more I learned, the more it seemed like there was no way out. But at least I had a direction now. I had a plan. The first step I learned was to confront the magic head-on. I had to break the link between Clara's spell and my life. The hardest part, though, was finding a way to believe that I could do it. Every time I tried to fight back, I felt a wave of doubt wash over me. How could I fight something so powerful, something so beyond my control? But Mia wasn't about to let me give up. She was determined to help me break free from Clara's magic, even if it meant taking on something bigger than either of us could handle. We tried different methods, rituals, prayers, and even some protection spells. Some nights we'd stay up late into the night, working by candlelight, surrounded by books and ancient texts, hoping to find something that would give me the strength to fight back. It was exhausting. Every attempt felt like a failure. And then, there were the moments when Clara's magic would strike back. I'd feel a sudden, crushing wave of despair. My emotions would spiral out of control, making it feel like I was back at square one. It wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional. Clara's influence was insidious, constantly working behind the scenes to erode my sense of self, to make me question everything. Every time I felt like I was making progress, I'd feel a pull, a tug in my chest, as if Clara was reaching into my soul and twisting it, trying to hold me captive. The hardest part was the isolation. Even though I had Mia, I still felt alone in this. My dad was completely unaware of the war going on in his own house, and Clara was getting more manipulative by the day. She knew I was starting to fight back, and she was doing everything she could to keep me in line. But something inside me snapped. I couldn't keep going like this. I couldn't keep living in fear, constantly looking over my shoulder. I had to fight back, no matter how impossible it seemed. This wasn't just about the magic anymore. This was about reclaiming my life, my freedom. And that was the turning point. I wasn't going to let Clara win. I was going to keep fighting, keep pushing, until I had broken free of her control, no matter what it took. It wasn't until the moment I confronted Clara directly that I truly understood the extent of her manipulation. For so long I had been fighting in the shadows, unsure of what to do, where to turn. But in the end there was no more running, no more hiding. The truth was out there, and it was time for both of us to face it. The day of the confrontation arrived like a storm. I had spent weeks preparing for it, trying to build up the courage to finally confront her about the curse, about the pain she had been causing me. My heart raced as I stood in the living room, the air thick with tension. Clara was sitting on the couch, reading one of her magazines, acting as if nothing was wrong. She always had that calm, collected demeanor, like she was always one step ahead of me. But this time I wasn't backing down. "Clara, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady but trembling at the edges. She looked up at me, her expression soft, almost concerned. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" she asked, using that overly sweet tone that I had come to despise. "I didn't waste time. I know what you've been doing. Curse. The magic. You've been using it on me." There was a moment of silence. I could see the faintest flicker of surprise in her eyes before she quickly masked it with a cold smile. "What are you talking about? You're just imagining things. You're stressed, that's all." But I wasn't buying it anymore. I couldn't afford to. I was done pretending, done letting her control the narrative. "Don't lie to me, Clara. I've seen the book. I've read the spell. I know what you've been doing. And I'm not going to let you ruin my life anymore." Her expression faltered for the briefest second, but then she leaned back into the couch, as if the conversation didn't matter. "You think you know everything, don't you?" she said, her voice dripping with a mixture of condescension and hidden rage. "But you don't. You never did. I didn't do this because I wanted to hurt you. I did it because I had no other choice." The words hit me like a slap. "What do you mean?" I asked, unable to keep the confusion out of my voice. What could she possibly mean? She had made my life a living hell for months. Clara sat up, her eyes narrowing as she looked at me. "You think this was about you, about controlling you. But it wasn't. This was about him, your father. About getting him to see me, to choose me over your mother. You see, I've always been the one who was left behind. Your mother had him first, and she ruined everything. She ruined me. I had to do something to make sure he would never leave me for her. And you were standing in my way." It was as if everything clicked. All the pieces that had been scattered in my mind finally came together. This wasn't just about me. This was about Clara's deep-seated jealousy, her need to feel validated, her desperate desire to control everything in our family. She wasn't doing this because she wanted to hurt me. She was doing it because she wanted to feel important. She wanted to feel like she mattered to someone. My father specifically. I took a step forward, anger bubbling in my chest. You're sick, Clara. You've been playing this game with me, pretending to be this perfect stepmother, all while trying to tear me apart. You've manipulated every situation, every moment to make me question my worth, to make me feel like I'm not enough. And for what? For your own selfish need to win. She didn't flinch, but I could see the cracks starting to form in her cool facade. The mask was slipping, and for the first time, I saw the broken woman underneath. The woman who had spent her life plotting revenge, twisting everything around her to make herself feel powerful. Don't you see? Clara said, her voice cracking slightly. I didn't have a choice. I was just trying to survive in a world where everyone else always got what they wanted. I was always second. And when I saw you and your dad together, when I saw how much he loved you, I realized I'd never have that. Not with him, not with anyone. So I did what I had to do. Her words were hollow, her justifications weak and pathetic. But even as I stood there, watching her crumble, I couldn't help but feel a tiny sliver of pity. Clara wasn't just a villain in this story. She was a woman consumed by her own demons, a person who had lost her way somewhere along the path. I'm sorry, she whispered, more to herself than to me. I didn't want it to go this far. But it had. And there was no going back. The damage had been done. The curse was broken, the web she had spun around me shattered. But there was no real victory in this moment. Not for me, and certainly not for her. We were both left standing in the wreckage of our lives, both responsible for the chaos we had created. I could feel the weight of everything lift off my shoulders, like a heavy fog finally clearing. But it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like the end of something, a chapter that had been written long before either of us had ever come into the picture. A chapter filled with lies, betrayal, and pain. And as I stood there looking at Clara, I knew that this was just the beginning of my healing process. This was only the first step in reclaiming my life. The next part, the hardest part, would be learning to trust again, to rebuild everything that had been destroyed. But for now I was done with her, done with the lies, done with the games. It was time to finally walk away, to take back what was mine, my life, my happiness. The aftermath of the confrontation left me in a strange, limbo-like state. On one hand, I felt like a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I had finally confronted Clara, exposed the truth, and shattered the curse she had placed on me. But on the other hand, I felt empty. I wasn't sure what to do next. For so long, my life had been dictated by Clara's influence, her manipulation, and her dark magic. It was hard to even imagine a world where I was free from that control. But I was free now. I had to remind myself of that. The battle wasn't over, but it had shifted. I was no longer trapped by the curse. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was standing on the edge of a new chapter, one that I had to rebuild myself. The first thing I had to do was to let go of the fear. For months, I had lived in constant anxiety, never knowing when the next blow would land. The curse had kept me on edge, and Clara's manipulation had made me doubt everything, especially myself. But now I had to relearn how to live without that fear weighing me down. I had to trust that I could stand on my own 2 feet, without relying on anyone else's approval or control. I started small. I took a walk around the neighborhood, something I hadn't done in weeks. It felt strange at first, almost as if the world had changed while I was locked inside my own head. But as I walked, I felt something shift within me. It was like breathing for the first time in ages. For so long I had been holding my breath, waiting for the next disaster to hit. But now I could finally exhale. The world was still there. The sun was still shining. But as much as I tried to convince myself that everything would be okay, there was still a lingering emptiness. I had lost so much over the past few months. My trust in people, especially in my father, was shattered. Clara's manipulation had tainted everything, and I was left to pick up the pieces. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, but it was the only path forward. I couldn't just move on without addressing the damage she had caused. The hardest part wasn't the curse. It wasn't the magic. It was the betrayal. Clara's betrayal had gone deeper than the spell. She had taken advantage of my trust, manipulated me into believing that she cared for me, all while secretly trying to destroy my life. That was the hardest pill to swallow. I had to accept that the woman who I had once seen as a mother figure was never that. She was a stranger. A dangerous stranger who had come into my life with nothing but lies. And then there was my father. He had been blind to it all. He had never seen the subtle ways Clara had manipulated him, had manipulated me. I couldn't blame him entirely. He was in love, and love made people do foolish things. But that didn't excuse his neglect of the reality that I was living. For months, I had been screaming for help, but he had been too blinded by Clara's false image to hear me. That hurt more than anything. But even through that pain, I knew I had to find a way to forgive him. Not for him but for me. Holding on to that anger, that resentment wouldn't help me heal. I had to move forward. I had to find peace not just with Clara, but with the choices I had made and the life I had lived. So I took my time. I worked on rebuilding my relationship with my father, slowly but surely. It wasn't easy, and it wasn't immediate. Trust, after all, isn't something you can get back overnight. But with every conversation, with every attempt to reconnect, I could feel the pieces of our relationship slowly coming back together. I had to be patient, not just with him but with myself. It wasn't just about rebuilding relationships, though. It was about rebuilding me. I had spent so long believing that I wasn't enough, that I wasn't worthy of love or happiness. Clara's spell had fed on those insecurities, making them worse, manipulating me into believing that I wasn't good enough. But that wasn't true. I wasn't broken. I wasn't a victim. I was strong. I was more than capable of healing, of finding my own path. I started focusing on things that made me happy, things that made me feel whole again. I returned to hobbies I had abandoned, like painting, reading, and running. Slowly but surely, I felt the old me returning. The girl who believed in herself, who knew that no one could ever take away her happiness again. I also reached out to my friends. Mia was always there, but I reconnected with others who had been part of my life before the curse. The relationships I had neglected while I was trapped in the nightmare of Clara's influence became my support system. They helped me rediscover the joy in life, the beauty of genuine, trusting relationships. The key to rebuilding was knowing that it wasn't just about moving on from Clara, it was about moving on for me. It wasn't about revenge or getting back at her. It was about healing, forgiving, and finding the strength to move forward stronger and more resilient than before. And when I looked at my life now, I could finally say I was free. I wasn't living in the shadows of Clara's curse anymore. I was living for myself, building the life I wanted, not the life someone else had tried to create for me. The road wasn't always easy, but with every step, I felt more powerful, more in control. I knew that no matter what happened, I would never let anyone take my happiness away from me again. As I stand here today, looking back on everything that happened, I can't help but reflect on what it all taught me. The battle I fought against Clara's curse, the emotional turmoil, and the heartache. It wasn't just a lesson in magic. It was a lesson in life, love, and the power of family. Clara may have thought she could control me, that she could manipulate the bonds between my father and me, but she underestimated something very important. Love. The love between family members isn't something that can be easily broken, no matter how much dark magic or manipulation you throw at it. It's resilient, it's powerful, and it's something that can withstand even the most painful trials. But that doesn't mean there aren't costs. Magic, whether literal or metaphorical, comes at a price. Clara's use of dark magic may have been born out of her own pain and jealousy, But it didn't change the fact that she hurt people. She damaged the trust in our family, and that damage took time to heal. It wasn't just the magic that caused the most harm. It was the betrayal, the manipulation, the way she broke down the love we had, one subtle action at a time. And yet, despite all that, there was something beautiful in what came next. The way I was able to rebuild, to take back what was mine, to restore the connections I had lost, not just with my father but with myself. The magic that Clara used to destroy me didn't just break my life. It gave me the strength to piece it back together, stronger than before. But the road to recovery wasn't easy. There were moments when I thought I couldn't go on. There were times when the weight of what Clara had done almost broke me. And I can't pretend it was all smooth sailing from there. But the most important thing I learned through it all was this. You are never truly powerless. Even when it feels like the world is against you, even when you're drowning in despair, you have the ability to fight back, to rebuild, to reclaim your life. The hardest thing in the world is learning to trust again, but once you realize that you hold the power to control your own life, everything changes. I've learned that forgiveness is just as important as strength, that sometimes forgiving the people who hurt you isn't just for them but for you. You can't move forward while holding on to anger. And while it's hard, sometimes it's the only way to find peace. Looking back at everything that happened with Clara, her curse, her lies, and her manipulation, it's clear to me now that I can't let that define me. It's not the magic that makes me strong. It's the way I fought to take back my life. It's the way I built a new path, one that was mine and mine alone. And as I stand here looking ahead, I know that there's nothing I can't face. Because I've already faced the worst. And I came out the other side stronger, wiser, and more in control of my own destiny than ever before. Free now. And that freedom is the most powerful magic of all. We just heard the shocking tale of betrayal, manipulation, and the fight for freedom. And while it may feel like a dark and painful journey, there's a powerful lesson in all of this. It's not just about the magic or the manipulation. It's about reclaiming your life, your peace, and your power. Remember, no matter what you've been through, no matter how dark things might seem, you have the ability to rise. It's in your hands. No one can control you unless you allow it. The path to healing, to forgiveness, and to rebuilding yourself is never easy, but it's always worth it. It's time to take back your life, to let go of the past, and to step into the future you deserve. So, what will you do with the knowledge you have now? Will you keep letting others control your narrative? Or will you break free and reclaim your happiness? The choice is yours. If you found inspiration or strength in this story, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you never miss an empowering story like this one. Let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you've ever felt trapped in a similar situation, let us know how you fought back. We're all in this together. Stay strong and don't forget, your freedom is in your hands.